I'm gonna start recording and let's go around the horn. And upper left for me is Laura Snow. So Laura, how you are, we're gonna go around and ask how everyone's doing.
We're doing fine.
And how is Ray's sister?
Ray's sister, which we heard about on Friday morning, has COVID. And she's really, really bad. She's in the hospital. No, I'm sorry, she's not in the hospital. She was supposed to have gone to the Outer Banks today and with her daughter, and she's not going, and the daughter's going, which kind of surprised us because the daughter's a PA. We thought she'd be around to take care of her mother, but she's not. So that was real interesting.
Well, I'm glad you guys made it back from San Marcos safely. That's good. 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 We had a little bit of excitement in our family that Mike and the two boys and his two sons, our son-in-law, someone hit him in the rear end on the way to school on Friday morning and totaled their car. But it turns out it wasn't that bad a wreck. They're all okay. The car's gone, but everybody was safe. But that was kind of a shocker for us. Anyway, everybody's doing okay. Carrie, how about you and Dave?
We're doing okay. Just
Good.
keep on.
That's good. And Jerry,
show up every day.
Jerry Baker, how about you? Jerry Baker, how about you?
Oh, hi. Yes, I'm here. I'm fine, and I survived. I had 2 drive-by events last week. Vicki will probably tell you about one of them, but the other one was at Hamilton Park Methodist Church. Every year, the district does a huge luncheon at Hamilton Park Methodist. And this year it was a drive-by. And so when I got there really early, Councilman Magoo came by the car and we chatted for a minute, and the entire Magoo family has had COVID. So yeah, and then you just said, Alison, he just shared that y'all had had COVID. So it's out there, y'all. Please continue to pray.
Okay, thank you very much. Joyce, how about you and Ken?
We're doing fine. I don't know if I told you last week, but if I did, Dennis, please stop me. My daughter who had COVID, her daughter has COVID also, but she's 7 and she was fine, but her husband and son don't have COVID. And we're trying to understand how that can happen living in the same household. But there's a lot we don't know about this virus.
Exactly.
And my daughter's mother-in-law has it, and she also has pneumonia with it. So she's pretty bad. But
We'll certainly pray for your family on that one. Thank you, Joyce.
Hey, Joyce.
yes.
This is going to be a slightly inappropriate question, but you did tell us this last week. But I'm curious: are the husband and wife sleeping in bed every night?
Yeah, I guess.
And he still hasn't contracted it. That's just amazing.
I know.
They've probably isolated.
You think?
Pardon me?
They've probably isolated.
Well, my daughter had it for quite a long time, and then they found out her daughter, the daughter had it, and then this husband and son went to be tested, and they don't have it. I don't.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah, that is.
Vicki, how about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I got to see my kids in Oklahoma City, and we had a good time, and I had safe driving, and there was snow on the side of the road and in their yards and everything, but it got up to 57 on Friday, so there was no snow by the time I left. It was pretty. And, we, for a long time, I know Bert, I think, would ask, or Travis, one of you would say, do any of you know anybody that's really had COVID? And, for a long time we didn't. But there were 3 funerals this week of people that I knew well. And so it's just scary.
Very
Still
sorry.
trying to be safe.
Yeah. Linda Gelser, how about you? How are you doing?
Doing well. You know, I kind of gave my brief update that my brother went to El Campo to their little memorial service that the funeral home has every year for people who passed during the year. So that helped him to go, and he said it was really, really nice. You were talking about people getting exposed to COVID. My sister had what turned out to be an indirect exposure. There were 3 young women in her office that went out to celebrate in a bar and went dancing and had dinner together, and they all 3 got COVID and were sick. But my sister got her test back. She had the good test. She got it back and she's negative, and she has not shown any symptoms, so she's good. But she'd been trying to isolate from her husband. You know, you're like worried you're going to pass all this stuff around. But I wanted to share that I heard some really interesting statistics this week from UT Southwestern, and through a friend who gets these memos. But interestingly enough, I think 68% of the people who have died have been Hispanic, predominantly males. Overall, all the males are having a much worse time than females. And then they said that Black people in Dallas County are exactly representative of what their population is. Whites are fairly below, but Hispanics are way over what their population representation is. So one of the things they were saying is that they don't really understand why, but they believe from their analysis, I guess, of these different tests, is that there could be something specifically in people of Mexican descent who have a harder time, even so than like Central and South American descent. So that almost every one of them, they said the biggest common denominator of the risk group tends to be obesity and specifically diabetes.
I heard that too.
So even more so than heart disease. And, you know, there's this calculator, I think, that you can go on to the CDC website. And it was interesting. I ran mine with putting in heart disease and not, because some doctors say, well, you have a real minimum. But I did it both ways, and it hardly made a difference. Hardly made a difference. But it's just kind of, those are just some interesting statistics. So I think, you know, people that you know and love, if you know any of that has anything to do with them, I would be really careful.
Diabetes, and what was the other one, Linda? Obesity?
Obesity.
Yeah.
But even people who are obese without diabetes, it sounds like do better than those who do. I think the diabetes is the number one thing, it seems like, in their, you know, analysis.
And the risk assessment tool is on CDC?
It's on the CDC website. It's called COVID Calculator or something like that. And it helps you calculate your risk, but I guess it's more, who knows if it's more scientifically, or it takes into account, you know, whatever numbers.
Yeah, because Ms. Linda, I was going to say, because usually with people that are, you know, have diabetes and everything, their immune systems, everything's already shot, just like with oncology patients. That's why whenever I have to go somewhere, because my mother-in-law is a type 2 diabetic, so we really have to take extra precautions because she also has a compromised immune system. And I guess it's the same thing with the people of color, because like you said before, because with the Caucasian side of things, everybody's immune system is completely different, and everybody's more prone, you know, to certain diseases and everything. Because with me being an interracial child and everything, I still have to take the precautions as well, just like my sister.
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
And I'm sure that there's, you know, all the things we look at in terms of disparity, in terms of access to health and all of that, I think consideration. But I find it interesting that even the elderly population, nursing homes or whatever, they are still, I guess, in the right, you know, perspective in terms of, you know, their numbers and all that stuff. It's not like higher than what you would expect. So
yeah, that's the same thing there, because when we go to Athens to go see Michael's grandmother and everything, because she's in her 80s and all that stuff, so we still, you know, just out of respect, you know, we still, you know, try to stay, you know, distanced and all that good stuff, because we all weren't quarantine together. Because, like I said, because she lives like an hour and a half away.
Right, right. Well, thank you all for that. Diana Early, how are you doing?
I'm good. Just praying right now. My nephew had a close contact with one of his hockey teammates who then later tested positive for COVID. So we're hanging on. That was Wednesday. He's still doing all right. So we're praying hard. He's isolating at home, praying hard that he doesn't end up getting it. And my sister texted us and said, good thing you didn't plan to come for Christmas because this is where we are right now. So, yeah.
Oh, okay, thanks for that. I'm sorry about that. That's sad. Joe Groner, how are you doing?
I am doing well. I have a number of opportunities that I'm tracking on the job front. Hope to have some good news to share there in the new year. But other than that, I continue to do well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. I know you're going to land on your feet. Travis and Patty, how are you guys doing today?
Good.
We are good.
I had news from a coworker. We now have 5 out of our 11 that either have had it and recovered or have it now. One of my coworkers has it, but so far his wife and young child don't have it. We're hoping that it stays that way.
Are you working from home, Travis?
Sorry?
Are you working at home?
I am. Yeah, I have been.
Good.
I'm the chicken out of the group. A lot of them go into the office and I just don't.
They have it, you don't.
They have it and I
You're
don't.
the smart
But who
one.
knows? I mean, tomorrow that could change. This is such a strange disease. I don't think that they got it going into the office. At least I hope. Who knows?
Yeah. Be safe. Be safe.
Mm-mm.
Tracy, how are you doing? Sorry about the loss of your mom.
Well, thank you. Good morning to everybody. So, yeah, it's difficult, but I wanted to say, a special thanks to everybody for the flowers that you sent. That meant a lot to the family, and got cards from several of you, and I appreciate that too. So it's tough. She was a sweet lady and was 86 and went pretty quickly. But as all of you know who've lost a parent, it's not easy.
Mm-mm.
So, but thank you very much for all the prayers and thoughts.
Okay. Very good. Okay. How are you and Diana doing?
Talking to me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. You talking to me? So we're doing okay. I guess we all have COVID stories. I have a student I was going to teach over. I've been teaching at his house, and they called me today. I was going to go over, and he is on the basketball team at ESD, and one of his buddies got COVID, so he's isolated. So I dodged a bullet. We did a virtual lesson. He seems to be okay right now, but it's as with all of you, it's hitting close to home with a lot of us, a lot of people.
Well, Bert, I'm sorry about all that, but we're looking very forward to your premiere of your music that you're going to play next week for the class. That'd be great.
Thank you. I am too.
Allison, you're the next on our screen. How are you and Mark faring after having COVID?
We're doing much better, thank you. It's a very weird disease. It does not have your normal trajectory. I'm sure you've read all about it. I mean, even with a mild case, which we all had mild cases. Garrett was asymptomatic. Mark, we think, brought it in, even though we don't know from where. He works from home too, but he is out grocery shopping and things like that some. But I had the worst case probably because I did have, again, low grade fever, still mild symptoms, but felt awful for a couple weeks. And our we get some random fatigue things happening out of the blue and things like that. And just a caution, just whatever you are, you've got to take major precautions because it doesn't matter. Even if you have a mild case, the long-term effects, they don't know. And, hopefully, and again, we're very aware of our I don't know how you'd say it. I don't want to say blessedness because, you know, I get it. I'm not going to get on that soapbox of hashtag blessed, but we feel very grateful for having had mild cases. And Garrett's girlfriend also had it. I forgot to say that. So our whole household did. It's very hard to isolate in a small house when you have two that are compromised. So that was just like, whoa.
Did Luke get it as well?
No, Luke and Tori did not. We had been with them the Friday night before Mark was had a positive test on Monday. And be careful because I had 2 negative quick rapid tests before I tested positive. So I mean, you can't even trust if you're having any symptoms and you have you know, and a rapid test is negative, don't take that as gospel.
That's what happens to my friend's house.
You got to go back and get the long
He was in the hospital very sick and tested negative. The first time they tested him again and he was positive.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, there's even though the tests are getting better and better, there's still kind of, and because Mark had tested positive, of course, I was like, I don't feel well. I'm pretty sure I'm positive, you know? So it's like, yikes. But anyway, thanks. We're doing fine. Today's Mark's birthday and I kicked him out of the house. So he's having to do his lesson at his office. So because we can't be in the same house doing a lesson together. So it's, as you know, my husband is rather loud, so it doesn't work.
That's great. Well, we're glad you guys are better. And you were the first people that I knew in person that had COVID.
Wow, really? Okay.
Brian, how are you doing? Brian?
I'm doing fine. I got to wear these for a whole nother month.
Ooh.
Yeah. I went to see the doctor on Wednesday. They took an x-ray of a fractured one and he said it is calcifying. So that's good. Other than you guys and the stories you just told, I don't know anyone who has tested positive for COVID. Two people in my gym told me that they had it. I've quit going to my gym since I hurt my hands. But in my real circle of friends and relatives, nobody has tested positive for it yet. So knock on wood.
Well, Dennis, I think I said earlier, I said Laura Smith. Well, no, it's Connie Smith. It's Guy Smith's wife. And she has had a rough time of it. She's been in the hospital. In fact, I think she still is in the hospital. She never she was in ICU, but she didn't have to be intubated. But they had a pretty high level of oxygen on her.
Okay. She was in ICU for 2 weeks or 1 week?
A little over a week, I think.
Yeah,
Alison.
She's in a regular room now, but yeah.
But she just, unbelievable how it hits. And doctors don't know how it's going. Sometimes my son, I was talking to him and he was talking to the doctor that lives behind him, who is a pulmonologist and who has been seeing all the COVID patients. And they said, why is it one person gets it and the next person and has a terrible case, and then people have it, are positive, but they're not having any symptoms, they're asymptomatic. Yeah. And I don't know, they went down the rabbit trail that it might be something to do with the genetics. And I don't know that we'll ever know.
No.
Blood type. I've read that.
It was amazing.
And there's a third wave of this that they say will be here in the spring, and it's mutating. So it means our vaccine may not be effective against it.
We'll have to see about that. Yeah, that's amazing. Kay and Jim, how about you guys? How are you?
We're doing well.
Very good. It's good to see you both. Bonnie, how about you and Robert?
We're doing okay. We're staying here for Christmas. We decided not to go to Louisiana. There's too risky. But good news, Jeff got the first dose of the vaccine on Friday.
Good.
So we're glad of that because he is around it.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Robert, how are you doing? Robert, you're muted right now, Robert.
Yeah.
Robert, you're muted.
Hi, Robert.
Yeah. Okay, Robert, now you can talk.
I'm fine. And my granddaughter came home, so that was a surprise.
Wonderful. She's back home from Colombia. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Excellent.
We're
Wonderful.
happy with that.
Looks like your dog's sitting this morning.
Yes.
I saw him wandering around in the background.
Two dogs.
Oh, puppy.
That's great. And okay, we heard from Brian. Nate, how are you and Michael doing?
Michael and I are doing pretty good. You know, he's the cold weather is not really his best friend right now, so he's trying to adapt to it. And for me, I guess the cold really doesn't bother me that much. But like I said earlier, the family is fine. And I also forgot to mention that my oldest niece had a very close encounter with COVID because one of her best friend's mom has it. But I texted my sister yesterday, and my niece doesn't have it, and neither does my sister, but they are still going to be in quarantine for Christmas.
Okay, thank you for that, Nate. Sandra, how are you doing?
Doing fine. Thank you. Doing well.
Good. You have everything you need?
I do.
Okay, very good. Alice, how are you doing?
I'm doing super. I don't go out hardly at all. So, I haven't had any problem with it.
Okay.
We go to Baylor and we go to the grocery store occasionally. I just don't go out. So I'm pretty
Wonderful.
Pretty safe.
Alice, this is Laura. I need you to call me.
Okay. Will do.
And Ron and Lisa, how are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Good.
Hi.
Hey, good to hear your voices. Okay, very good. If one last thing, I told some people before, but I didn't tell everybody, Don and Barbara are not here today, Don and Barbara Floyd, because they are driving to Atoka, Oklahoma. I don't know if that's where her sister lives or if that's halfway, but they're exchanging gifts today, and they said they were going to miss it, and they would ask the class to pray for safe travel. So they'll be back later today, but we'll miss them. Anyone else have anything to add before? Oh, yes, Vicki.
Well, this is good news, I guess. Pat Austin called me, I think it was Friday night, and they've moved into Traditions, and she said their place was lovely, and she just sounded so happy. She said, "You're the first call I've made." And I felt real honored, but I kept, we've been talking, so, but they just are real happy and satisfied, so that's a good thing.
Did they keep their home number, their regular number now? They kept their phone number?
Well, I don't know. They have a cell phone, but she doesn't give that out. So I didn't even know it until about 2 weeks ago. But I don't know. I'll have to ask about that.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, yes, Joyce.
Just quickly, if you could pray for my daughter, Lauren. She tested. It was slight case of strep, but they also tested her for COVID, but they used the rapid test. And as you said, there's a lot of false negatives, but they also sent it in and they won't know until Monday. Okay. So we're praying.
Is she in New Jersey?
No, the one here.
Oh, here. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, Allison, if you've got it, I'll mute everyone, and then Vicky's going to close us in prayer whenever you're finished, 9:40, 9:45, whatever. But if you'll unmute yourself, Allison, it's all you.
All right, I'm unmuted. I had to change to my reading glasses here. So, and I hope you all will unmute. because I still am assuming you are a talkative class, and I can tell just by the opening you are. Even on Zoom, yay! So we are talking about the parables today, and a couple of thoughts here to let you know that, first of all, I'm using several sources, a little bit of the New Interpreter's Bible commentary, my standard shtick, and then a little bit, something a little bit different. And that is the short stories by Jesus, the enigmatic parables of a controversial rabbi by Amy Jill Levine. Has anybody heard of this book or read it? No one? It's fantastic, but don't read it until after we do the next parables, January 10th. So you won't steal my thunder, okay? Okay. But she is a rabbi and a scholar, obviously, and brings some really interesting thoughts to the parables of Jesus. And I thought, you know what, we've sat with many of these and heard all the standard shtick on them. And I thought, you know, it'd be nice to look at something differently and make us think, even on this Christmas, almost Christmas time day. So a little bit of background. I don't know how much you've talked about. I know you're just getting into the Gospels and Matthew's focus. First of all, we need to remember that what we have now has been modified to fit the agenda of each Gospel writer. So as the parables were handed on and around to the church's teaching and preaching, they were interpreted and modified to address new situations, which really is typical storytelling, right? You take a story and you modify it to fit what you're wanting to talk about, or to, you know, it's your own interpretation. And that's kind of what happens in each of the Gospels with the parables. They illuminate the way Jesus's potent message was heard and interpreted as the early Christians struggled to apply it to their own situations after Easter. So we have to kind of remember that's part of the setting. And part of what we're going to try to do today is go in a little deeper and say, okay, but what about when Jesus actually presented these parables, and how would to Jews as a Jew? And that's kind of where the Amy Jill Levine's commentary comes in very handy. Okay, so we're in Matthew 13, and Matthew's located the parable discourse, as it's been called, in the midst of the conflict section in which Jesus is being rejected by the leaders of Israel. The section is preceded by the rejection of Jesus by the Pharisees and by his own family. And then immediately following this whole chapter of parables, Jesus is rejected with hostility in his own hometown. So Matthew created this structure, remember that. And as a result, Jesus's parables are his commentary, Matthew's commentary on the meaning of Jesus' rejection by Israel and the founding of the new community. So a lot of our perspective on these is taken from Matthew's perspective. So the next thing is the kingdom of God, or heaven, as Matthew likes to say. All the parables in Matthew 13 have an explicit reference to the kingdom of God / heaven. Since judgment is at the heart of Matthew's view of the kingdom, this means that for Matthew, parables of the kingdom means parables of the coming judgment. So there's a lot of harsh parables in Matthew 13, as if you read ahead. Where am I? Okay, for Matthew, to know God's plan for history, culminating in the judgment of the Son of Man, is to know the mysteries of the kingdom of God. Again, that's the New Interpreter's commentary. I just thought it was good background. So that gives us an idea of where Matthew was coming from. But what about Jesus and his parables? Let's give a little background about parables. First of all, Jesus's parables appear only in the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And the non-canonical, I I said that pretty well, didn't I? The non-canonical Gospel of Thomas repeats a few of them and adds a few distinct ones as well. John is the outlier as usual, right? And does not have parables in it. What is the difference between a parable and an allegory? Jerry ought to be able to tell us that. Unmute yourself if you can answer or would like to answer. The difference between a parable and an allegory.
My understanding, if I remember from my high school English properly, is that in an allegory, all of the things in the story represent something else, whereas a parable is more, it takes everyday things, everyday activities, and makes a lesson out of them, as opposed to every single thing in the story having a symbol. Is that
A+? Yes, absolutely. That's perfect. Exactly. There's not a one-to-one relationship, and you don't have an allegory. I don't know if you remember, what are some of those weird ones we had to study, where you have to actually have a key to follow it, because you're like, what is this about? So that is exactly in a nutshell what it is. Thank you, Diana. So Amy, Dr. Levine, I need to say, like a poem, a parable will evoke numerous interpretations. It is our job to sort through them. So they're very open-ended, right? There's a few in Matthew where you actually have Jesus explaining the parables to the disciples. But most of the parables in all three Gospels are open-ended, and there's a reason for that. We have to struggle, right? We are supposed to struggle anyway. Sometimes we don't, but we should be struggling with these to see, okay, where do I fit in the story? Or what does this mean for me today? What did it mean for the Jews at that time? There's a whole lot of layers in these very simple, sometimes one-liners that I think we skim over. Okay, so Jesus uses the parables as a way to capture his audiences and our imagination. And like I said, to keep us thinking, rather than a sermon that lays out a theology or a do this or follow these rules. He presents stories and one-liners involving common and everyday people and parts of nature that were relevant to his listeners then, and I would argue are still relevant to us today. So Levine said that the parables are open-ended and that interpretation will take place in every act of reading, but they're also historically specific, which we need to remember. That's where we kind of go off the rails, I think. So it behooves us to be aware of the historical context before we try to interpret them or find relevance for our own lives today. So the dangers of taming Jesus's parables or taking the easy way out and explaining a parable are myriad. And she is pretty strong about this. She says, down through the centuries, starting with the gospel writers themselves, the parables have been allegorized, moralized, Christologized, and otherwise tamed into either platitudes as such as God loves us or be nice, or worse, assurances that all is right with the world as long as we believe in Jesus. So that's pretty stout words. What do you all think about that? Anyone?
No, I think I like what she said. I mean, it's becoming a Christian is not going to solve all your problems. That
right.
It probably will start more problems. But at any rate, I like what she said.
I do too, and I'd like to hear where she goes with it.
Yeah, well, we'll touch on it. I can't go too deep, but we will touch on it and touch on it more when we talk about all of the lost parables. So. Who I'm teaching again in January 10th. I was like, ooh, yeah, I can do parables and parables. So the first hearers of these parables were, of course, Jews, right? And Jews knew that parables and tellers of parables were there to prompt them to see the world in a different way. It wasn't, sometimes I think I've been taught that it was unusual for Jesus to speak in parables so much, but it wasn't quite as unusual as we've been led to believe, apparently. The tradition of parables is in the Old Testament too. Can anybody think about a parable, a famous parable perhaps, that was used to slap someone in the face? His name's David.
Yeah, Nathan.
Yeah, exactly. Very famous parable where Nathan, I mean, sometimes we just call it a story, but it really is a parable about the rich man and the poor man with the lamb. If you all remember that, if you don't, look it up, because the only way to get through to David was by telling a parable. And then, I mean, if he had just preached a sermon, said, you did wrong, I know you did wrong, I don't think David would have listened. But because he heard that parable and was like incensed about what the rich man did, it wasn't until Nathan turned it on its head and said, you're the rich man, that David realized how wrong he'd been. So again, a challenge. So Jews were very familiar with parables. Let's see, where do I want to go? So she suggests we approach the parables a little bit differently. She said we might be better off thinking less about what they mean, which I think we spend a lot of time doing, and we'll still talk about that today, and more about what they can do. Parables can remind, they can provoke, they can refine us, confront us, and definitely disturb us. In hearing the parables without their millennia of domestication, I love that, that's her, not me. In hearing them in their rawness, we might hear a new message, not only of the kingdom of heaven, but of how to find it on earth. So I think I would suggest we need to, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. When Matthew talks about the kingdom of heaven, I suggest we need to think about the kingdom of heaven here on earth. One of the tricks Levine offers is to figure out what is normal in a parable and what is odd or exaggerated. And for that, we do need the historical context, right? Because otherwise we're putting our own, what we know, rather than what they would have known at that time or understood. So any comments or questions before we dig into a couple of the parables in Matthew? Okay. So all that being said, I'm going to look at, I'd like us to look at several of the short parables in Matthew 13, which I think we tend to skim over and say, oh yeah, this means this and da-da-da, and we're done, and do a deep dive for them. So let's look at Matthew 13, verses 31 through 33. I had that pulled up. Let me find it. I have too many.
I've got it.
Okay, thank you. I had too many windows open here. Go ahead and read it for us, 31 through 33.
He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all your seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and perch in its branches.
Keep going.
Oh.
The next one too.
He told them still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into a large amount of flour until it worked all through the dough. Okay. Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. I'd like to actually look at the second one first. There are three that go together. We're going to just look at two, the parable of the yeast and the parable of the mustard seed. Let's look at the parable of the yeast, which I think has been a little bit overlooked in the past. And how have you understood this parable, or how has it been explained to you in the past? The yeast and the bread.
Very little that I know about making bread. I think I've maybe done it once without a bread maker.
Even during the pandemic?
I'm not one of those, I can't do something that takes a long process, okay? Especially when it's food. But I have actually, over the last couple of years that my niece brought a husband into the family, he is a trained chef. And to watch that man make bread is amazing. It's like artwork. He does great things with yeast and making a bread from yeast. I guess my first observation would be that, that when you read it here, it looks like, oh, they just took, yeast and flour and voila, but it takes a while. And so, but you can take a little bit and make it go a long way. I mean, it grows or expands, and then the same thing with that, mustard seed making a big tree. So, I keep falling back to that same idea that we've talked about, in that just the kingdom of heaven, with just a little bit can go a long way. I mean, that's about as far as my brain can go with it, but that's what I think of as just expanding and kind of never ceasing.
Yeah.
What about patience?
Wait, who said that? Bert. I couldn't find you. Yeah. I know you're here somewhere, Bert. Okay, there you are.
Yeah, I mean, to me, both of those take time.
Okay.
Right. And part of it might be that you need patience in this whole process of believing. It doesn't happen overnight.
Good. Vicky?
Well, it also seems to me like they're tiny and can seem real insignificant, but with the right artist, like Linda said, or the artisan, or the master, it can be made really important and significant.
Good.
I'd always thought that yeast was the quintessential element that made it happen. If you just put the flour and water together and whatever else without the yeast, that it just would be kind of a flat, uninteresting, probably untasting type of concoction.
Okay.
I also thought that, well, I looked it up in the dictionary, and apparently leavened, when it's leavened, the dough becomes lighter. And and dough rises because it becomes lighter. So okay. That's my only contribution.
But it's a good one. I like it.
There's also historical contextual cues that come from yeast and leavening. Unleavened bread is what is eaten at the Passover.
Right.
And so leavening has these really deep running contextual cues throughout the Old Testament.
Nice. And the interesting thing is, Travis, that most of those are negative. Most of the, even though leaven is just an everyday normal thing, it's not like they didn't use it. They used it all the time, except for the Passover, right? But there are quite a few references to leaven as kind of in a negative connotation, which is interesting because in this instance, it doesn't appear to be, does it? So I think that's it's one of those layers we have to start pulling through.
Sometimes a little bit of something can spoil everything.
Exactly.
And sometimes if it's the right thing, it can actually make it better. And in this context, I think that the yeast is intended to suggest that the bread is made better by the leavening.
Exactly.
But that's not always the case.
Very good. Very good.
I also think too, and Kay, I believe, is a bread maker, but
of course she is. That's awesome.
There are certain things about yeast. If you don't get the water hot enough, or if you get it too hot, it's not activated properly. And if you knead it too much, it spoils the quality of the bread. So all that to say, there are a lot of factors that have to be right for yeast to do the job properly, right?
Jim, you need to unmute. Okay. Nope, still. Nope. We still can't hear you. Can you all unmute?
There you go.
There we go.
Baking bread that creates a great sense of anticipation because it goes all through the house and you get very hungry when someone is baking bread.
Definitely. Nice. I like that. I like that sense of anticipation. That could definitely work in the way we relate to the kingdom of heaven, can't it? I love all of those are great. I'm going to throw a few more things at you about what Levine and also some others I found mixed in, where it says that a woman took, where is it? Like you said, a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour, which sounds perfectly normal to us, right? Well, guess what? Here's none of those surprises. The Greek is actually hid. So the NRSV and several other versions kind of miss the mark on this. This is one of those surprises that Jesus puts in there because all it says is that she hid the leaven in the bread. So now it's like, okay, that sort of changes things, doesn't it? The other thing that we need to know about this is that when we think 3 measures of flour, I think I always just thought, oh, that's just, like 3 cups or whatever, 3 measures of flour. Well, no, it's a heck of a lot of flour, like 40 to 60 pounds of flour.
Wow.
Which I never knew. So this bread is destined for a whole lot more people than just one family. Like maybe a whole banquet. Little hint there. So really 2 oddities to the short parable that would have been of note to Jesus's listeners: the word hid rather than mix, and the large amount of flour involved. And one other little note: leaven in antiquity is what we today call sourdough starter. So it's different from the little yeast packets like what we use. As some of you might use sourdough. I think it's wonderful. I've never tried it. I know I've seen on Facebook a lot of people trying it during this pandemic, but anyway, so and it was essential for baking. It is definitely an essential ingredient. One way to bring this parable into focus or enhance our understanding of it is to look at how else bread functions in Jesus's teaching and ministry. So what are some ideas? Bread is, Jesus uses that a lot. What comes to mind when we say something about bread in the New Testament and Jesus?
Lord's Supper.
Lord's Supper, definitely.
You
I'm the
don't
bread of life.
You can't live by bread alone.
Yep. There you go. Give us this day our daily bread.
Mm-hmm.
Filling.
What?
It's filling.
It's filling.
It fills you up.
Yeah.
He always had loaves with the fishes.
There you go. Yeah. The feeding of the 5,000. Another huge amount of people being fed, right? The other interesting thing is daily bread harkens back to the Old Testament manna and reflects how God provides for our needs. Again, she's looking at it from a different perspective, and I'm like, oh, I never even thought about comparing this bread to manna. The term, and then give us this day our daily bread, the term translated daily also has a connotation of for tomorrow or for the future. So then there you have like that anticipation, right? That Jim just talked about, the anticipation of the bread baking. So all that's kind of cool, I think. And that brings us to the heavenly banquet imagery, such as in Matthew 8 and 11. I tell you, many will come from east and west and will eat with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of God. The Jewish idea of feasting in the world to come permeates the stories of Jesus and permeates his own mission as well. So this one tiny little thing, one verse has a whole lot more meaning than I think we've ever given it credit for. And the simple parable might not be so simple, right? Any parable, Levine says, with a reference to leaven, dough, or bread brings with it all this appetizing accompaniment. She's a great writer. And it makes the parable more nourishing. Isn't that cool? So now the yeast, there is an ick factor at play, right? We talked about sometimes it can be a negative connotation. I think it's because yeast by itself, sourdough starter, if you've ever been around that, it smells, right? it doesn't smell good, it smells, but it is necessary to the process. It might be utilitarian, but it's necessary. Word of note, and Levine goes through a long process. I've lost my screen over here. Sorry, just a second. She goes through a long process of deconstructing what's been said about all these parables. And one of the most harmful and anti-Semitic is that yeast is impure, and she says that that a lot of theologians have attacked the purity laws of Jews, and it's been used. A lot of these parables have been used in not a good way. So trying to talk about the church separate from Jewish theology. Okay, so let's go back to the parable of the yeast. Sorry, I got a little off. Perhaps there's some other ways to look at it too. The whole aspect of hiding it in the dough could also refer back to a couple stories that she ties it to, mainly the Genesis story of Abraham and Sarah entertaining angels, whatever we refer back to the Trinity, the three strangers, when they come and Abraham's like, you need to go fix a feast for them. And one of the things he says is, oh, we're going to make you some cakes. And guess what? It refers back to the three measures. Those cakes used 3 measures of flour. So she ties all that in, and also, let me find it. Dang it. I had another quote here marked that I didn't pull off. If I can find it, I will. Sorry. Well, basically the idea was that, that was the same time that they announced that Abraham and Sarah were going to have a child, right? And that's when she laughed and all of that good stuff. But it ties it all together because part of it ties with the word hid again. And it means like mystery. And there's a word in the same story in Genesis. So she's tying it all together and I'm going, oh my gosh, this just blows me away. But anyway, one interpretation could be that hid in the womb, right? So you have a child in the womb instead of just a regular piece of bread. But then again, it can be just a piece of bread. Another way to look at it that we kind of skirted around is that given the enormous yield that would result from 40 to 60 pounds of flour, perhaps the parable speaks to the importance of extravagance and generosity. I like that. It's like she's not making a loaf just for her family. She's making a loaf for the entire village. I think that's pretty cool too. Or finally, perhaps the parable tells us that despite all our images of golden slippers and harps and halos, the kingdom is present at the communal oven of a Galilean village when everyone has enough to eat. Excuse me. When everyone has enough to eat. So I hope that kind of peels back that one little parable and shows you that we need to be more aware perhaps and more challenged by Jesus's parables, which that's what we're supposed to do, right? So
Allison,
yes.
Allison, question for you. When you said that word snuck it in, for some reason in my mind, it popped in when Joseph put the silver cup into the bag of his brothers and used that as a hook to get them back it was like, to get control of them again or to bring them back.
Interesting. Oh, we need to look and see if that's the same root too. I don't know. Same root word. That's really interesting. I like that. Any other comments? Anything else that pops out at you that maybe you didn't think about with this parable that could apply to us today? Okay.
Can I offer a random thought? I don't know if this is on.
Of course.
It just occurs to me. Yeast is a living thing. And in the right place, in the right context, it takes flour and creates bread that, who doesn't like it, right? And you mentioned earlier when we were talking about leavening, that's a lot of times in other contexts in the Old Testament, leavening is not necessarily a good thing. Well, there are other things that are living things as well, and those can create. When you put yeast into flour, it creates. This is going to sound negative, but it creates essentially a beneficial infection because it spreads through the dough.
Yeah.
And that's just one living thing multiplying in the context of another, in the context of a medium. And so, but not everything, there are bad infections too, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There are other living things that if you had put them into that dough would spoil it. And maybe there is a leavening that could spoil the dough. And that would be bad, and that would explain why it's sometimes in a negative context in the Old Testament. But if you have the right leavening, Jesus, and it spreads throughout, then there's a beneficial effect that comes from that, a life-creating and sustaining effect that comes from that.
Nice.
Random thought.
Very nice. Okay. All right. Let's do just a little bit of the mustard seed. I'm going to respect our time, I promise. And we will do more. I wanted to give the parable background now so that we can dig into some meat in a couple weeks too. The mustard seed parable, what is the standard interpretation you've always heard from this? Right? Small thing, big things come from small, right? You plant a little seed, and I mean, the mustard seed Jesus uses in other contexts of faith of a mustard seed, all of that good stuff. So is there a challenge though in hearing that from small beginnings come great things? Is there really a provocation or a challenge in the point that Jesus's message grew over time? I mean, that's just kind of a historical fact now, right? And it doesn't really challenge it. So let's strip it down to the elements and see maybe where something's unusual that Jesus is talking about. A couple ideas. First of all, the mustard seed, while the small is not the smallest seed, the other thing to point out is the mustard seed is singular. It's only one seed. The branches, whether of a tree or a shrub, is another element, which, by the way, the mustard seed does not grow to a tree. It's just a shrub. And so that's one of the things that would have caught people's attention, right? It's like, wait a minute, mustard seeds don't grow into trees. And the branches provide shelter, the birds of the air taking shelter. So all three, I'll just tell you, all three synoptic gospels have the same parable. They're pretty sure, yes, it did originate from Jesus. The parable of the mustard seed, I love this, Levine says, has put forth so many branches of interpretation that the birds of heaven could build multiple nests and still have room for expansion. So, she's very sarcastic, which I love. So, but let's break it down further and look at where Jesus is exaggerating, or what I like is perhaps using humor to get the wheels turning, which obviously I like also. It's not the smallest of seeds, as I said. They don't grow into giant trees. Levine says there's no reason to presume that the seed must represent faith, the gospel, or the Christ, which this was sort of like, I've always heard that it does, right? She says that there's no necessary reason for seeing the tree as the church or the birds, the nations of the world. Perhaps the seed, the plant, and the birds are exactly that. So interesting. So if parables are supposed to provoke reflection and challenge, how is this parable doing that? She challenges to say we don't need genetic mutation to see the parable as provocative. The parable speaks of the significance of the seed, that one seed grew into a plant, that thus no seed is or should be seen as insignificant. Sort of like the leaven, right? Each contains life within it. The transformation of yeast and dough into bread and of seed into plant opens another interpretation. What we see now is potential, but that potential needs to be actualized. The yeast has to be placed into the dough, which the woman does. The seed has to be planted, which the sower does. Even small actions or hidden actions have the potential to produce great things. Where are we? Okay, I know, I need to finish up. I always run out of time, Dennis, I'm sorry. So part of the thing is that she points out is that we are part of a larger process. And sometimes we forget that, I think. And the other thing is, although we may start an action, once started, it can often do quite well on its own. So you can take that, some more food for thought. The other thing she said is sometimes we need to get out of the way. Somebody mentioned, if you overwork the dough, it's not going to be any good. It's going to be tough. It won't rise, etc. And the other thing is we are not always the focus. I think in the United States, that's really hard for us to hear, isn't it? We're not always the focus. The final image is not a focus on the human actor. If you notice, each of these parables and many of the others start with a woman, a man, a merchant, etc. But the focus in the end is on the results of the action. Isn't that interesting? I thought, oh, yeah. The other thing to point out and remember for both of these is that both images are of domestic concerns. The seed parable is set in a garden or a local field. The yeast parable is set at a village oven. The kingdom of heaven is found in what today we might call our own backyard, in the generosity of nature, and then the daily working of men and women. Sometimes we think we have to do some big old thing, right? To reach somebody or help somebody, whatever. No, I mean, it could be as simple as baked bread for those who break it, or I buy it, but something yummy. I lost you all, just a second. There we go. It can be something as simple as that. Sorry, I lost everything here. Oh no.
We can hear and see you.
As long as you can hear and see me, that's good. My screen went wacko. I went to another screen accidentally and did not intend to. So lovely technology. So anyway, I think that explains a lot of what I wanted to say. I had one other note, but I can't find it right now. I'm sorry. So anyway, any other comments, questions, concerns?
Very interesting.
Food for thought. Ha ha. Pun intended.
We appreciate it, Alison, always, and we look forward to seeing you in January as well. We have one join us. I think she's had to go again. Dale's still here. Dale, how are you doing? How are you and your family doing? You're
She's
muted. Dale, we understand your daughter is back in town.
She is. She surprised us. My husband knew and kept the secret.
Oh.
And then we went and surprised my
Wonderful.
dad. So
Good
that
to
was
see
a very nice surprise.
Good, good. It's good to see you. Anyone else have any comments? Allison, we thank you again before Vicky prays. Vicky, it's all yours. Thank you so much, Allison, again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, pray with me. Our most gracious Heavenly Father and loving God, we just, we worship you today with your word, and we thank you for that, because this is how we grow. This is how we learn about you. This is how we learn about your ways. This is how we learn about your love. We have so much to be grateful for. We're a group really that has been so blessed, each of us, although, you know, a lot are dealing with a lot of things, but we're just so grateful because you are a loving God, and you care about every need that we have. And today our list is long, but we know you care, and we know that you hear and you act on these prayers. So today I just want to ask you to be with Tracy and his brother and family as they mourn the death of his mother, who was buried on Tuesday. And I do pray that he felt our prayers and our concern for him and our love for him. So I just pray that you would wrap your arms around him, give him comfort and peace during these next days and weeks and months as he goes on with his mother. Pray that I think Ray and Laura have already gone on their trip to the wedding, and I thank you for safe travel. I pray for Ray's sister with Camilla, who tested positive for COVID, that you'll be with her, and I pray that it's a light case and she recovers very quickly. And Joyce Adams has two daughters that need your help today, Lord, and one is Lauren with strep, and she has the COVID test. I just pray that it'll be negative, and Lisa, who has tested positive. So they are in the midst of this right now, and I just pray that you will really take care of them and keep them safe. And Joyce's cousin also, Emily, that has had this pain with her artificial aorta. I just pray that the pain will subside and that she'll be better, and that will heal and give her a normal life with the new aorta. Pray for Leanna and Aaron as they have this job search, the co-pastor position that they're looking at in, I think, Waco, I believe. And I just pray that whatever your will is for their life in their ministry, that they will recognize that it is your will and they can act on that. I just pray that you will be with them in that decision. Be with Connie and Guy Smith as they are trying to recover from COVID. And I know she's still in the hospital. The last word that I had, I just pray that you would really heal her body and help her to get home safely and completely recover. Linda's family, as she goes through these holiday seasons without her mother and with all her siblings, it's just a very difficult time, as many of us know. And we're just so, our hearts really ache for these who are going through this time of grief right now. So help us to be prayerful for them because they need this. Pray that you'll be with Joe in the death and his family, with his cousin, the Stevens family, and with his job search. Pray that you'll be with him and help him to see that it's your will, whatever comes his way that he desires. And I pray that he will know that it's your choice for him. And Diana still is concerned about the husband of her friend and the daughters, the lady who died of COVID, and I know that she's mourned her death, and just pray that you be with Diana too, because she's in pain. And also her nephew has been exposed, and my grandson has been exposed, so I just pray that you be with them, and I pray that they don't really test positive, that they'll be okay. We're still praying for Gwen Morris's son, Brent, who had a stroke, that you'll give him a complete recovery as he goes through his rehab. For Bert's loss of his longtime friend in the symphony. It's been a while, but I know the pain is still there, and so for this man's family, I just pray that you would comfort them. And Faye Larson, oh my goodness, her vocal cords, that I can't even imagine how she deals with that. I just pray that you would heal that and help her to really see an improvement soon. She really needs to be better to work with her husband and her mother. She's got such a big responsibility. Be with Brian and the healing of his bone in his hand that will heal quickly and correctly. And Dale Cohen has a co-worker and friend that has tested positive, and he's Paula. Pray that you will be with her. Don and Barbara Floyd, their son-in-law Matt is still having pain, I think, from his surgery in his neck, and I pray that you will be with him and give him complete recovery and give them safe travels as they are out this weekend. And Pat Austin is healing and doing so much better. And I just pray that you will be with them as they, with their sweet attitude and moving to the transition. They're just precious people to me and to our church. And I just pray that you'll continue to help them to, feel grateful for this opportunity to be there, meet new people, and to be in a new home, basically. Pray for Brianna, who is Diane's neighbor's daughter, who going through this bone marrow disease that she has and the transplant that's coming soon, and just pray that will be available to her and that she will have healing. We just pray for our city and our country facing this COVID. It just seems to just be rampant right now, and this is like the third giant phase. And Lord, we just need to see this disappear. We need to see the vaccine given and working and doing their thing, and seeing that the numbers go down and that people feel safer being out, even though we still need to be careful. I'm thankful that Nate joined us today and that we will have a guarantee of a job, even though his spa is closing. So we're really grateful for that, for his generous boss. That's very sweet for him to do that, and for his mother and mother-in-law to be improving. So we're very grateful for that too, Lord. And thank you for Alison today. Just such a neat lesson for us to chew on this week and to really read again and go back and think about. And thank you for what it means to each of us individually, and the fact that we were able to look at it from different angles. And we thank you for that and for her efforts in teaching today. Thank you for Laura and Dennis as they keep us together, keep us in Zoom, keep us connected to each other and praying for each other. Just help us to be a real prayerful people, because each of you are so important to each other, to me and to each other. And we just need to continue to pray for each other, because some of the needs are really great right now. Lord, we love you and we just praise your holy, holy name. And be with us the rest of this day, Lord, to keep it holy. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you, Allison.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone have a wonderful Christmas.
You too, guys. Thank you. So good to see all your faces. It's very fun.
Tell Mark happy birthday.
I
for us.
will. Yeah. I will. Yeah, I'm so mean. I'd kick him out on his birthday.
Bye, guys.
He'll
Merry
survive.
Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas, y'all. Bye-bye.
Great Christmas, everyone.
Love you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Good to see you, Tracy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you again for everything.
Well, thank
Love
you.
you.
Well, yes.